Hey, what's up, you guys? It's your girl Lauren Sizzle, and you are now tuned in to one of the hottest talk shows in the nation, We Talk Weekly's After the Talk.
I'm Classy Lady Sparkle. You want to binge listen to our shows? Follow the We Talk Weekly's podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Spreaker.
What up, folks? It's your boy Charles Gregory. Make sure to follow us on all our socials at We Talk Weekly.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Lily. So make sure you keep it locked to We Talk Weekly on 106.5 FM.
WPPMLP Philadelphia 106.5 FM. We Talk Weeklies After the Talk with your boy Charles Gregory and the beautiful
Lauren Sizzle.
and the beautiful Classy Lady. Who do we have today?
In honor of Women's Month, we have the perfect guest. Ellen Cassidy is the author of a new book called Working 9 to 5, A Woman's Movement, a Labor Union, and the iconic movie with a foreword by Jane Fonda. Ellen was the founder of the 9 to 5 working women's movement, which started in Boston 50 years ago and expanded nationwide into a feisty, multiracial organization and won millions of dollars in back pay and raises for women and people of color. Along the way, they inspired a Hollywood hit movie and Dolly Parton's enduring anthem, Working 9 to 5.
Oh, wow.
And they made countless bosses get their own coffee. This is going to be a very interesting talk. Let's give a warm We Talk Weekly welcome to Miss Ellen Cassidy.
Hey. How are you?
Good. Great to be here.
Fantastic. 50 years.
50 years ago, I was a clerk typist at Harvard University in Boston.
Wow.
And I was 22 years old. And we started sitting around in a circle talking about our jobs. And we had a lot to share: low pay, unequal pay, dead-end jobs, training men to be our own supervisors, and having to do favors, all kinds of favors for our bosses.
Wow. It's interesting that you say that, training men to be your supervisors. That's a crazy concept right there.
Yeah, I mean, they thought women all we were good for was typing and filing. Wow. And in fact, a lot of times we were running the office.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And we didn't get the credit for it.
Yeah.
So we started talking, we started putting out a newsletter, and pretty soon we were taking on the biggest banks and insurance companies in Boston. And then we expanded nationwide, including to Philadelphia. And we united women of all ages, classes, and races. And we started a woman-led union, and things began to change.
Wow. Amazing. What do you see, before I get into the incredible Dolly Parton, right? The incredible Dolly Parton. I mean, I love her to death. Before we get into that, why don't we, what do you see the differences between I guess the suffrage movement, and the women's movement of today? Do you see any parallels, or do you see anything different?
Well, I think that today's working women activists are standing on the shoulders of those who came before. So when we were starting out in the 1970s, when I was just fresh out of college, I thought a lot about the garment women of the early 20th century. And they were out there, they went on strike in something that was called the Uprising of the 20,000. And these were like teenage girls. A lot of them didn't speak English. And they went out, 20,000 of them strong, into the streets, and they won higher pay and better benefits and better working conditions, safety conditions, and they really transformed the labor unions of their time. And then later in the 30s and 40s, you had women out there supporting the workers in the auto plants and the steel plants. Then you had the civil rights movement and the women's liberation movement. And by the time we got started, we had people, we were part of a chain of women who had banded together, linked arms, and tried to make their lives better. And I think that's what's happening today as well. And the suffrage struggle was part of that. Why shouldn't women have the right to vote? Is that fair? No.
Absolutely. When you think of what prompted the actual movement that you started, though, like what was it was that aha moment where you put your foot down and said, you know what, that's it?
Yeah, well, one day a student walked into the office and he looked around and he looked one of us straight in the eye and he said, "Isn't anybody here?" And we thought, wait a minute, I'm here. Can't you see me? It's like that feeling of invisibility and like lack of respect. I remember one person said, they call us girls until the day we retire without a pension. So, it was a coming together. In the early 70s, there were millions and millions of women pouring into the workforce. And we had been affected by the civil rights movement and by the women's movement to look around and think, we want our rights and we want respect. And I remember at the time there was this week at the end of April where a boss was supposed to give his secretary a box of chocolates or a bouquet of flowers in thanks for a year of hard work. Right. And we thought, wait a minute, we want our rights 365 days a year, right? So we started a thing called the Petty Office Procedures Contest, or the Bad Boss Contest. And we invited women to send in an example of like the most outrageous thing they'd ever been asked to do on the job. And then we went out, we like gathered our forces and we went on our lunch hour with TV cameras. And we confronted the boss who had asked his secretary to sew up a hole in his trousers while he was wearing them. Wow. And the boss who had has fired his secretary for bringing him a corned beef sandwich on white bread instead of rye. Wow. There was another boss we confronted who had like a suspicious package arrived in the mail. And he turns to his secretary and says, this could be a bomb. You open it. So years later, I was living in Philadelphia. I'm now in New York, but I was living in Philadelphia. And I was writing a column for the Philadelphia Daily News. And I decided to run this contest through the column. And so I put out the word, and people sent in their submissions to the contest. And the first prize went to a boss who had required his secretary to write a letter to the manufacturer of his underwear complaining that they bunched up in the crotch. And then she had to send back the used underwear in the mail. Wow. This is a secretary. The second prize went to a woman whose boss had handed her a container of his own warm urine and asked her to take it to the lab. And there was another one whose the boss brought his son to the office and required the secretary to take him out on a date. There was one who invited his secretary to lunch, and then on the way to the restaurant, he asked her to walk over a steam vent to see what color underwear she was wearing. Wow. So, our point was that a secretary is hired to perform company-related duties, not to be a valet, not to satisfy the every whim of a boss. And if a boss has to ask a secretary to do non-job related duties, she should have the opportunity to say no. And then what we said to secretaries was, learn to say no. So, this was one of the things that I highlighted in my column at the Daily News. My column was about work from the workers' point of view. What was bothering workers? What do they like about their jobs? What was bugging them about their jobs? And I wrote a story about a SEPTA worker who dropped dead from job-related stress. I wrote about a trash collector who was angry when a passerby called him a bum. I wrote about a woman who had gone back to work right after her baby was born, and that wasn't right for her family. One of the most amazing things was I wrote about janitors who were cleaning the Pico building. And the Pico hired a contractor, subcontractor, to get the work done of cleaning the bathrooms after hours. And this contractor came in and required the janitors, sat them all down and said, okay, from now on, you have to go out, buy a toothbrush, and then get down on your knees and scrub around the toilets with the toothbrush. And they were given 20 minutes per bathroom to get it all done. And it was like this newly demeaning task that they had to do. So they all signed cards for a union. 5 of them were fired, which is illegal, by the way. It's not legal to fire workers for union activity. That's protected by the National Labor Relations Act. And I wrote about it, and it became sort of a hot issue. And the janitors won their union, and they won the wages and working conditions they needed through their union. Okay. So that was just one thing that I'm going to be talking about when I come to Philadelphia at the end of this month on March 31st, a Friday, to speak at the Women's History Month gathering of the Coalition of Labor Union Women at 5 p.m. for Women's History Month. There's also going to be people there from the Temple University organizing drive, the Starbucks organizing drive, and the Art Museum organizers will be there too. And I'm going to talk about the 9 to 5 movement and also look back at my daily news column. And I really encourage people to get in touch with the Coalition of Labor Union Women, which you can reach at www.phillyclue, and come on over to that meeting because it's going to be really, really exciting, I think.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We'll definitely have to try to come down there. I'm really interested because of that union. What is their agenda? What are the initiatives that they're pushing, right? Or feel that's very important to them? And I ask that because, and I would love to get your position on this. We are at a historical moment as it relates to a mayoral candidate at this point. Who will be our next mayor? We have literally about 10 or 11 people running, right? And it's people that's really, on the fence about who, has the best interest for them and who they would like to endorse. So knowing that, that's the current state of what Philadelphia is in, what would be the interest for, an organization like that to say, this is the type of mayor that I would like to support the needs and the issues that we have?
Well, the Coalition of Labor Union Women was formed in 1974, just around the same time that 9 to 5 formed our organization. And it was women who were in unions who had two things in mind. One was that women should be more recognized as leaders of unions and get to, use their skills and have their voices heard within unions. And number two, that there were so many women who were not in unions and they needed to be organized. And that was the case for office workers. So in Philadelphia, just like across the country, you have a surge of union organizing going on with Temple University and Starbucks and the Art Museum and the Please Touch Museum. Right. And, today, 71% of Americans support unions today. And that is a higher percentage than any time since 1965. So unions are really, and I think the pandemic probably had something to do with it. Yeah. I think the murder of George Floyd had something to do with it. And I think the persistent income inequality that we have in our country has also just sort of given a lot of a boost and an oomph to that union organizing that's going on all over. And the Coalition for Labor Union Women is women who are leaders in their own unions and who are pushing for more people to get organized.
Right, right. Wow. Do you see any movement in, how can I put this? Do you see any movement on the things that women struggled in or were allowed to do, or policy or systems back then that they are now able to say that, I feel a bit more liberated. I feel that I have agency now. I feel that I can, I'm no longer a prisoner at work now, or I have to bring the boss the coffee, so to speak. Do you see any movement, that there have been any strides, any, growth with respect to that?
Great question. We won a lot back then. And today, I think the most important thing is that issues that used to be considered matters of individual, personal life are now matters of policy. Corporate policy, union policy, government policy. So pregnancy discrimination is illegal today. Sexual harassment is illegal. Right. You don't have help wanted male and help wanted female jobs anymore, ads in the newspapers anymore. And managerial jobs have opened up, especially for college educated women. But as we know, in some ways, it's harder to be a working person today than it was 50 years ago. Yeah. In the gig economy, some people are working 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table. Fewer people today have paid vacations, regular schedules, paid sick leave. And there's computerized monitoring, which was just getting started back then, and a relentless pace of work that makes the lives of many workers really miserable. But the good news is the surge of organizing that we're seeing. So, and the new voices and new tactics that we're seeing, like the barbecues at Amazon and the sip-ins at Starbucks, and restaurant workers and baristas and retail workers and warehouse workers and grad students are all organizing. And I think it's a very exciting time for people to try to make things better on their job.
Agree. Ellen, you are so interesting, especially hearing back from the suppressions that women have endured. And just to point out what you just said, that the times have changed. Now, within Google, Yahoo, you have these silicone tech companies that are now having lounges, and they're having different approaches. Mothers are still, trying to work and trying to raise families. There's different movements like the breastfeeding. They're making sure that they have it in their policy, having a safe, comfortable place that you can, nurse for your child, things like that. Are these things that was thought of back when, when you had started the 9 to 5?
A lot of these things are new. But, when I see those things like breastfeeding rooms, I think that's great. But, what's really great is that when you've got a newborn and you're breastfeeding, do you have to go to work? Whose interest is that in? Is that in the interest of the mother, or is it in the interest of the boss? And so I would like to see way more flexibility in the workplace for working families, both men and women, so that you didn't have to sacrifice your career when you had a family. Because I think that the pressures on working families are just ridiculous. And it's not like this in other countries, and it doesn't have to be that way here.
Interesting. Wow. I have another question as it relates to, so we talked about the moment that you said, this is where we had to put our foot down, right? When was the moment that you realized that the movement became so big, so national, so large that icon like Dolly Parton was like, hey, what's going on here? I need to know what's going on. And, then it became syndicated and a show that turned into a movie. And it got so big, just the initiative to know that it started with, you guys over there. When was that moment? And why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Jane Fonda came to us in, I think it was 1977. And she said she wanted to make a movie about the concerns of office workers. Now, she knew one of our members from the anti-Vietnam War movement, and they'd been keeping in touch. And Karen had been keeping her in touch with the boss who wanted his pants sewed up and all the things we were talking about. And so she came to us, and we were, of course, thrilled. And she sent her team to meet with a few dozen of our members. And they all sat around the room together, and her team posed a question we had never thought to ask anybody, which was, have you ever fantasized about doing in your boss? And there was a moment of stunned silence. And then the room just exploded because it turned out everybody had. So one woman had fantasized about grinding her boss up in the coffee grinder. And another woman wanted to swivel her boss around in his swivel chair and swivel him right out the window. And all those fantasies went right into the script of what became this hit movie in 1980 called 9 to 5. And if you've seen it recently, it really, really stands up. It's very funny, and it just nails the issues. And Dolly Parton's song is now, has endured and is this toe-tapping anthem that everybody knows. And it says it all. It says, I tumble out of bed, stumble to the kitchen, and then the boss doesn't want to give me a promotion, but the tide's going to turn, and it's all going to turn your way. We're all in the same boat. So once that movie came out, we had won the debate. That movie, women had never seen each other seen themselves on the big screen. And it really hit a nerve. And women used to stand up in the theater. There's this one scene where Jane Fonda is trying to deal with this balky photocopying machine. Papers are flying. She's starting to cry. And people would stand up and say, hit the stop button. And once that movie came out and that song was on everybody's lips, we had won the debate. and it was time to consolidate our power. So we started our woman-led union, and the Service Employees International Union gave us a charter to organize all over the country. And we sent our organizers everywhere, and we started actually signing people up into the union. We brought thousands of women into the union, and people got it in writing: higher pay, better benefits, a say over their working conditions. Now, we ran into really furious resistance from employers. They did not want a union.
I'm sure.
But in response, we thought of some pretty clever tactics that you can read about in my book. For example, at this one university in the state of Washington, we were sort of at an impasse with the negotiations with the boss. And the women decided that the issue of Tampax machines was going to be a key bargaining point. Now, they actually wanted more Tampax machines in the work site. But the real reason they wanted to talk about Tampax was that every time they used the word Tampax, the management negotiators, some of them got so flustered that they had to leave the room. So we won a great contract.
That's funny. That's funny. What year was that?
In the early mid-'80s.
Mid-'80s. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. And the initiative 9 to 5, what year was that?
We started it in 1973. And 1973 was the year when the average American family the income started to go downhill. Up to that point, for the average family, income was just sort of incrementally rising every year. And you could, when you looked at your parents and how they were doing, you could expect to do better in your life. Now, in 1973, that changed, and the average family started to see a decline in the value of their wages. And so that was a time when so many women came flooding into the workforce, and things were really in turmoil in the economy. And that was, I think, the reason why we started getting going, in addition to the cultural changes, because of the civil rights movement and the women's movement, where people were thinking, I don't have to put up with this, that I can ask for more. And that's a very volatile moment in society. So, in my book, what I wanted to do was write the kind of book that I was hungry for when I was starting out, when I, got this bug and decided I needed to make things change. And I became like a full-time organizer, a staff person, working out of a tiny office in the YWCA. And I wanted books that talked about what that was like, to be working passionately for a cause and confronting these problems and wanting to throw in the towel sometimes. But, what were the organizing tactics that we used and these crazy things we thought up? And we went around, we talked to everybody and tried to get advice. And we took in what people were saying, but we also realized we were going to have to figure it out on our own. And we just sort of put our heads down and went forward doing whatever worked. And I think that's what today's activists are doing too, and have to do, because it's never over. You never win it all. And the next generation is always going to think up their own ways of moving forward. And I'm really glad to see that that's happening today.
Is there a women's union? Is there a women's union that exists?
Well, increasingly, unions are led by women. For example, the AFL-CIO, which is the federation of most unions in America, has its first woman president, Liz Shuler. And the Service Employees International Union has a woman leader, and the teachers have a woman leader, and the flight attendants have a woman leader. And all these, when we got started, we ran around, we tried to find the women leaders, and you could count them on one hand. They just weren't there. Now they are. So women increasingly have a voice in unions. And of course, a union is only as strong as its members. And if you expect to sign a card and then have somebody else take care of it, think again. So the Coalition of Labor Union Women, where I'm going to be speaking at the end of the month, their whole point is, let's make our voices heard within our unions and use our solidarity as women to win things at our workplaces.
That's right. Yeah, this is, I think even in the sports arena, we had a lot of women who were speaking out that it was they felt that it was unfair, that even the pay with soccer and basketball and even the locker rooms were not what the men were getting. So, yeah, that was, Ellen, you're very interesting, and you hit a lot of good points tonight. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And I hope people will get a hold of my book, which is called Working 9 to 5. And it tells this really lively, inspiring story.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I got a couple more questions though, real
Okay.
quick, because I don't want you to leave just yet.
Okay,
Right?
fine.
Yeah, because I got a special question that I'm going to ask you, because I think I think you're going to be able to give me a great answer. But in any event, what if it was three of the top issues as it relates, or that you believe would be significant for women today, right? What would be those three top issues or three major concerns that you would like addressed?
Well, at the workplace, I would say that the working family issues are really at the top of people's minds. I think equity and equality, racial, gender, age is very important. And, part of what plays into that is occupational segregation, where so many jobs, if you look around, so many jobs are either mostly male or mostly female. And the male jobs tend to pay better. And that's part of the reason for the wage gap that persists, especially for Black women and all women of color. So I would, those are my issues.
Yeah, and you mentioned, and I think that's a great question. One of the arguments to that, the wage gap, is that, and I like how you say, the segregation of it, right? One of the arguments are that men and women are choosing the jobs that they want to be in, right? Not necessarily that they're being held away from the job, but most women, you find them in service-oriented jobs. You find them in, safe example, childcare. But then when it comes to men, you find them in maybe, garbage truck workers, or you find them in heavy labor. Do you think the wage gap has something to do with that, in terms of the division of it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, part of it is just historical, that some of those heavy industry jobs, they unionized years ago. And so their pay is better, or they're stereotyped as, why should a parking lot attendant get paid more than a childcare worker? Somebody who's paid to take care of your car gets more than someone who's paid to take care of your child. Does that make sense? No.
How about that, right? Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
But then it's also true that, it's easier to be a childcare worker and have your own family than it is to have a job where the hours are completely rigid. So we need some more flexibility in all those kinds of jobs.
Right.
Do you ever see the wage gap narrow, completely leveling out to the same of what men are earning? I know it's been, over the last few years or decades, it's been kind of narrowing, but, we're still making 82, 83 cents to the dollar of the man. Do you ever see that being like we're making essentially the same thing?
Yeah, well, when we got started, it was like 57 or 59 cents to the dollar, and that was in the early 70s. And then a lot of progress was made, but then it got stuck at 82, 83 cents, as you said, and worse for women of color.
Yes.
And I think for that to change, you're going to have to get some more flexibility in the workplace, because what they find is that women who take time off to take care of their families, which women do more than men do, they really suffer in their wages over their lifetime. So it's going to take some real cultural change and change at the workplace. And I think, that it's not going to change person by person. It's going to change group by group. It's going to change politically. It's going to change by worker power at the workplace.
Do you think that means like having more women in management positions or leadership positions in the workplace? Do you think that would, help?
It might help. And the main thing that will help is, we're all brought up to think that the way you get ahead is do it on your own. The way you change anything in your life is, it's your fault. You've got to change it. But one of the great things about 9 to 5 was that women realized, individuals can make a difference, but individuals working together can make a bigger difference. And I think we're going to have to see that before things really, really change and before the wage gap really narrows.
Ellen, I have a peculiar question. With the genre we're in now, with the LGBTQ community, and for women's rights and work, what do you think about the transgender woman being involved with, what the movement initially started out as?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Transgender women, women of all genders, women who identify in whatever way are welcome. And again, it's all about people linking arms and taking action together.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a village, to move the mark, definitely. Okay, here's my special question. All right. Now, you know hundreds and thousands of people. You've been fighting a good fight, so to speak, for a long time, especially as it relates to, our women of power, or women who have been empowered, right? Knowing that you know all of these people, right? I want you to tell me the one thing that no one else knows about Ellen Cassidy. That you can tell us right now. I mean, no one else knows about you. Your best friend, everybody. Just tell me one thing.
I am an open book. That's why I wrote the book. I told things in the book that I had never told anybody before, and get the book and you'll find out about.
Yes.
Some people see that book as a love story, because I tell the story of my boyfriend when I was 22 and what happened and how we worked it out and all that. And there's a lot of personal information, because I feel like, when you tell the story of a social change movement, what really makes it sing is that you create sort of an intimate perch from which people can explore a wider world. So you're like right there with the reader, and you're saying, come with me, sit with me, and I'm going to show you what happened. So I have this phrase, up close and universal, which is like up close and personal, but up close and universal. So I really used my own self and my own fears and doubts and joys and successes to really illuminate a much bigger picture. And I do think that's really important.
Okay, I like how you answer that, but I'm not going to let you off the hook just yet, right? So tell me a hidden talent that you have.
A hidden talent?
A hidden talent, yes.
Oh, man. All right. This is going to be really weird. You owe me for this one. When I was 9 years old, for some reason, I decided that it was very important that I should be able to move my pinky toe away from the other toes independently. I just like make it go out there to the side and come back and go out there to the. And I worked on that until I succeeded in perfecting that talent. And that's it. That's the only thing.
I love it. I love it. I love it. By the way, were you practicing that when you was telling me?
No.
Okay. Well,
I'm going to try that when I get home.
Well, I just want to thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I think it was really important, especially during this month, Women's History Month. I think it was relevant, and I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed talking to you and meeting you and learning things, and it's history, which I think a lot of us don't pay too much attention to or give too much credence to. We need our history. We need to know where we've been, to know where we're going, right?
Yeah, for me, it's been so important. Maybe not every day, but every week, I definitely look back and I feel sustained by what people have done before me. And I feel like I'm part of this chain of working people's activism I don't know where I'd be without it. Yes. Really. And I really appreciate your support and all your questions, except for that one question.
Ellen, we also want to give you your flowers because you have been a part of the movement, specifically for women of color as well. And just, just, like Charles said, fighting the good fight. So thank you for all that you've done and continuously doing.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're great.
I want to know, because, so many people at this point are standing on your shoulders now, right? Whose shoulders did you stand on? Who encouraged you and inspired you and made you want to, go to the next level, made you want to fight,
Yeah, well, it was those teenagers from the turn of the 20th century, and then it was those women who supported the sit-down strikers of the auto and steel industries in the 1930s and 40s, and it was the civil rights movement. My parents took me on civil rights marches, and then the women's movement, where we didn't feel exactly in the absolute heart of the women's liberation movement of the 60s, but we felt like we were a little different. For example, a lot of our members, before they sat down at lunch with us, they would say, "Just a minute, I just want you to know I am not a feminist." We thought, okay, you don't have to use that word, that's fine. And then they would say, "But I do support equality, I do want equal pay, I do want to be treated better." So, we didn't stand on ceremony. But yeah, no, I felt like I was definitely standing on the shoulders of other people. And I hope people feel that way today too.
Yes, thank you. You've been paving the way, and I like how you mentioned the industrial and steel workers, because during that time, I think it was Rosie the Riveter, right? During the 40s, I believe, and it's always been a movement to say, hey, don't forget us, look at us, and we want to be empowered, and we're feeling marginalized, so make sure that we have access. And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you have done, even for, our people, even for the community, and I appreciate that so much. How can everyone get in contact with you, find out more about you, and why don't you give the time and date of where you'll be giving the keynote?
Yeah, so people can get in touch with me at ellen@ellencassidy.com. You can get my book wherever books are sold. Either online or, at your favorite bookstore. And then the meeting at the end of March is March 31st. It's a Friday, 5 p.m., the Coalition of Labor Union Women. So get in touch with Philadelphia CLUW, CLUW, and come on over. It's going to be great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. I got an interesting question. Did she sign your book?
Who?
Dolly. Did Dolly sign?
Dolly Parton? No, yes. She made that great song, and Jane Fonda wrote the foreword to the book. So
that's so big, Jane Fonda.
Yeah,
literally. Oh, amazing.
She's a force of nature.
Thank you again for coming to the show. We really appreciate that. And one thing that we say on the show is once you come to the show, you're a friend to the show, so you're always welcome to come back.
Great. Thank you so much. Really a pleasure. Really.
What's up, you guys? It's your girl, Lauren Sizzle, and you are now tuned in to one of the hottest talk shows in the nation, We Talk Weekly's After the Talk.
I'm Classy Lady Sparkle. You want to binge listen to our shows? Follow the We Talk Weekly's podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Spreaker.
What up, folks? It's your boy, Charles Gregory. Make sure to follow us on all our socials at We Talk Weekly.
Hey, y'all, it's your girl, Lily. So make sure you keep it locked to We Talk Weekly on 106.5 FM.